I did not bend, I match him, he said. He spoke half of his English in the present tense. I match him. Referring to the always well-postured Reagan, and I think Garrett is slouching just a little bit. And what profound things do these men say to each other? Reagan noticed that Miroslav had the same hearing aid as he had. That's what they were talking about. And then he asked a simple question. By the way, Mr. Havel, where are you from? No doubt prompted by that trace of non-Irishness in my father's accent. I am from Ireland, Mr. President, came the unhesitating reply, and Reagan smiled, not quite believing that a man named Miroslav Havel, who sounded like that, could possibly be from Ireland. In the gift room of the White House, afterwards, Miroslav noticed the crystal ashtray that he had designed for John F. Kennedy and that sat on the late president's desk to the day of his assassination. And it was signed, Havel 1961, one of the very few times he signed his work. And the reason he didn't sign his work, ladies and gentlemen, once again, responding to the theme that I've been pressing this evening, is because he felt himself to be an industrial designer. He wasn't in the business of creating these special pieces. His first priority was the mass marketplace through Waterford Crystal. Local writer Jim Nolan produced a radio series called The Glass, which was mentioned by some of you tonight. It was well received across the country, and especially in Waterford. In it, Jim said that it was a wonderful day for Waterford when Miroslav Havel and Charles Patrick came over the bridge. 1947. They didn't come over together, but Jim was poetically licensed to say that. Sean Daly of Dingle Crystal, and a protege of my father's, told me that Miroslav always hoped that Waterford would stay true to its handcrafted tradition, even as technology allowed much of the work to be mechanized. In fact, he always wanted a small, exclusive boutique with about 200 employees, not so very different from what's there now, actually, but much like Steuben in New York, that he admired so much. But he ended up helping to create a huge, multifaceted company in the 1960s that produced everything from delicate thimble-sized liqueurs to mammoth stateroom chandeliers. And of course, Steuben only exists because it's a small part of a massive multinational corporation called Corning Glass that produces Pyrex kitchenware. Conduli would never have wanted that kind of approach. He saw the US market. But still, Miroslav had no personal doubt. He had no personal doubt that all his production design work was an intrinsically artistic experience. For 4 decades, he tried to maintain a design strategy that would reconcile the inevitable tension between a genuine handmade product and the mass marketplace. And in doing that, he helped to create a world brand name and a new tradition, and to educate generations of young Irish craftsmen and women. It was an incredible achievement in industrial history, in mass production, and high art. And Conduli always assured my father that Waterford glass would remain distinctive because it would always be produced and marketed as though Miroslav Havel himself were shoveling the silica sand and the red lead into the furnace and putting the perpendicular cuts on the Lismore goblets. That whole idea was economically unsustainable, and some degree of technological enhancement became necessary as costs rose. But ladies and gentlemen, what if Waterford, like other great luxury companies around the world, had never compromised on the craftsmanship? Gucci, Luxottica, Rolex, Tiffany, Versace, Swarovski, Waterford was ranked with these names. What if it had, as the Americans say, stuck to its knitting, do the thing you do best, instead of discounting the product in Walmart or outsourcing it to China, instead of slapping the name Waterford on everything from bed linens to fountain pens? Would it have had a different destiny after my father retired from the one that it actually had? Because after he retired came the bankruptcy, the occupation of the visitors' centre. What a tragedy that was. The pension scandal, now thankfully resolved. The sale to a US hedge fund. Their CEO said that the company had been managed into a ditch. Those were his exact words. And I think they've done a wonderful job of holding on to some of the tradition in that very impressive new facility on the Mall, the closure and the demolition of Kilbarry, and now another sale, this time to a Finnish home products company, primarily makers of garden furniture, trying to diversify into luxury lines. Well, you know, hindsight. Waterford got lucky twice with crystal. Once when British taxes forced the Penroses to come over here to start their original factory in 1783. And once when two Czechoslovakian gentlemen made their strange pilgrimage to this city in the very challenging economic circumstances of Waterford and Ireland in the 1940s. But it was this Czech-Irishman who steered Waterford glass into the success that made its name, that made it the glass of fashion in the 20th century. And the fact remains, no matter who did this, that this is now the heritage of Waterford City and of Ireland. The human design skills, the silica sand used to make the crystal, the skills of the cutters and the engravers, 25,000 years of accumulated man and women hours, over 40 years of my father's career. Can't be thrown away. It can't be thrown away. All of this was more than an industrial product, ladies and gentlemen. It was a national art form, no different, in my view, frankly, than the Book of Kells, or Kelly's Book, as the Americans call it. Maybe some other crazy Czech with a mastery of crystal will one day come across Waterford's new bridge with the knowledge that Havel and Batchik brought to this city in the 1940s. I hope that what they brought to Waterford will not be lost, and that the Waterford glass tradition will not die with my father. I thank you for listening to my edited version of Miroslav Havel's story, a long journey from a small village in Bohemia to the south lawn of the White House. This multi-talented man who was the first employee of Waterford Glass, as Michael Marr called this talk. My thanks again to Erica and Michael and Beatrice and all the members of the Waterford Literary and Historical and Archaeological Society for your kind invitation to speak to you tonight in this beautiful St. Patrick's Gate Hall. Thank you very much.
It's not very often that I'm stuck for words, but I am. I mean, it was masterful. You are just such an excellent speaker. I'd say we could listen to you talk about anything, but certainly the life of your beloved. I know he was beloved to your father and his life. It's just a marvellous story. His actual journey and voyage to Waterford, and the whole thing about the way you drew it all in about Waterford as a city and what it owes to your father. Definitely more than the Penrose. The Penrose were the earlier ones, but definitely your father. And I don't know, I just think it's a marvellous, marvellous lecture, and it all tied in. It was like throwing a pebble and the ripples came out. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful lecture.